Okay, so today we're going to talk about Module 3, Lesson 2 for College Prep Math 2. We're going to talk about multiplying and dividing fractions today. We start with multiplying and dividing before we start with adding and subtracting because it's actually quite a bit simpler. The rules are simpler compared to adding and subtracting. We'll see that in the next lesson. But what these are going to look like is we start with a couple of fractions. I'm just going to call the first one A over B and the second one C over D. Okay, and when we multiply these two fractions, all we do is we multiply straight across the top. So A times C will be my new numerator, and we multiply straight across the bottom. B times D will be my new denominator. Okay, now there is one little step we're going to do before we go through this process, and that is to look for common factors and simplify them out first, because sure, we could simplify at the end like we talked about in the last lesson, but the numbers are going to be bigger. Before we multiply, our values are smaller, and so simplifying is typically easier. So that's going to be our process. We're going to look for common factors when we're multiplying fractions like this. We're going to cancel them out top to bottom. Okay, and then once we're done, we're going to multiply straight across the top, straight across the bottom. Okay, so let's look at a few examples and see how this works. So we'll start with a very simple one. So if we have something like 2 over 9 times, 2 over 9 times 1 over 9. Okay, when I look at this, I see a 2 and a 1 on the top, and neither one of those numbers goes in to 9 on the bottom evenly. There's no common factors in this thing. So if there's no common factors, I'm just going to do the rule. I'm just going to multiply straight across the top. So 2 times 1 is 2. On the bottom, same thing. 9 times 9 is 81. And so 2 over 81 is my answer. And the nice thing is, because I was careful and I went through and I checked to see if this was able to be reduced before I multiplied, I am going to get an answer that's in lowest terms. Okay, so let's look at one where we do have to do a little bit of simplifying. And another important thing to remember is that we got to remember all of our sign rules, right? We can certainly be multiplying signed numbers here as well, but there's nothing new. It's just because we're dealing with fractions doesn't change our rule. So if we have negative 3/7 times 2/9, don't let that negative sign mess you up. I mean, we know what happens when we multiply a negative times a positive, right? Our signs are different. Our answer is negative, just like it was back in Module 1, okay? And so now a lot of people would maybe just multiply straight across the top, straight across the bottom. Don't do that yet, because what you want to do first is you want to look at these numbers on the top and bottom, and you want to see if there's anything in common in these numbers on the top and bottom. So to me, the one that jumps out is the 3 and the 9, because 3 goes into 3, right? And 3 times 3 is 9, so 3 goes into 9 as well. So we can cancel these out. We can reduce these down before we multiply. Again, it's easier to do here when our numbers are smaller, easier to work with. So I'm just going to kind of cross them off and divide it out. 3 divided by 3 is 1. I can do that as long as I do 9 divided by 3 is 3, okay? And then all I have left on the top are 1 and 2. Doesn't go into 7 or 3 on the bottom. So that's all of my common factors. Okay, so now I'm going to do my rule. Multiply straight across the top. 1 times 2 is 2. On the bottom, 7 times 3 is 21. So negative 2 over 21 is going to be my answer. And because, again, I took a second, I reduced it before I multiplied, as long as you're careful and thorough with checking for those common factors before you multiply, your answer is going to be in lowest terms and you'll be all set. Okay? Let's do another one. So negative 5 over 3 times negative 3 over 29. Okay, and again, don't let the signs mess you up. Nothing has changed in our rules from before. We know what happens when we multiply a negative times a negative. A negative times a negative is a positive. So I know my answer is going to be positive. Never going to think about the sign again. I've already dealt with it. Okay, so next I'm going to look for common factors on the top and bottom. 5, nothing I can do there, but these 3's on the top and bottom are both divisible by 3. They're the same, so we can simplify them out. So 3 divided by 3 is 1 on the top. 3 divided by 3 is 1 on the bottom. We can divide the same thing out on the top and bottom. Okay, 5 has nothing in common with anything on the bottom, so I'm done here. So I'm ready to do my rule. Multiply straight across the top. 5 times 1 is 5. 1 times 29 is 29, so 5 over 29 is my answer. Okay? So not too bad. We just want to make sure we're simplifying before we multiply because we want to get it into lowest terms. Okay, let's do one more with 3 terms. So 7 over 25 times 1 over 3 times 5 over 14. So even when we have more than 2 terms, we can still use that same process. We can cancel any common factors, and it doesn't matter where they are. If we're dealing with multiplication, all that matters is that our common factors are one's on the top and one's on the bottom. So if I'm looking at this, the first thing that jumps out at me is this 7 and this 14. 7 times 1 is 7. 7 times 2 is 14, so I can divide a 7 out of both of these. So I'm going to do that. 7 divided by 7 is 1. 14 divided by 7 is 2. Okay. Next, I notice this 5 and this 25, both divisible by 5. 5 goes into 5 one time. 25 divided by 5 is 5, right? And then that's it, because all I've got left on the top is a bunch of 1s. You definitely can't reduce anything else if you just have 1s for your pieces, for your factors numerators. So now we're ready to work it out. We're going to use our rule. We're just going to multiply straight across the top, straight across the bottom. So 1 times 1 times 1 is 1 up top. 5 times 3 is 15. 15 times 2 is 30. So 1 over 30 is going to be our product here. So again, if we have more than 2 factors, doesn't change our process. We're just going to look for those common factors top to bottom, and they can be anywhere on the top and on the bottom. We just want to be able to divide those common factors out, right? And then once we get all of those reduced, we just multiply straight across the top, straight across the bottom. And again, as long as we're careful and we're thorough with our simplifying before we multiply, our answer is going to be in lowest terms, which is good. We don't want to have to deal with that later, so it's worth it to take, the numbers are smaller at the beginning, easier to work with. You definitely want to simplify there first. Okay, so let's talk about division a little bit now. When we have 2 fractions that are divided, so a over b divided by c over d, we're not going to work with it in this form. What we're going to do is we're going to learn a process for rewriting this as a multiplication problem. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to leave the first fraction the same, so a over b. We're going to change the division to a multiplication, okay, and then we're going to take our second fraction and we're going to flip it upside down. Okay, just make this d over c, and then we're going to deal with it just like we have been doing. So we're just going to multiply straight across the top, straight across the bottom. And again, like with all of our multiplications, you'll probably want to take a second to reduce first when the numbers are smaller and it's easier to work with. So that's going to be kind of our process there. So let's look at a couple of examples here. So let's say we have something like 7/8 divided by 15/16. Okay, all I'm going to do is I'm going to keep that first fraction the same. I'm going to change my division to a multiplication, and I'm going to flip my second fraction upside down. Okay, and now I've just rewritten this division as an equivalent multiplication problem. And now I'm just going to do it like the last several questions that we've been working on. I'm just going to go through and I'm going to simplify first. 8 and 16, both divisible by 8. So 8 divided by 8 is 1. 16 divided by 8 is 2. I can cancel that out. 7 and 2 don't go into 15 or 1, so there's no more common factors. So I'm ready to use my multiplication rule. I'm going to multiply straight across the top. 7 times 2 is 14. 1 times 15 is 15. So 14 over 15 is our answer here. Okay? Can certainly have some problems with negatives in them. You might have something like, let's do something with a little more going on in it. So let's say we have 1 divided by 3/7 times negative 2/3. Okay, so in a problem like this, we do need to work our way through the order of operations like we've seen before. I'm going to do the parentheses here first, all of our operations inside the parentheses. So I'm going to be starting with my division here. So this is the same thing as 1 times 7 over 3. Okay. And then I'm going to, anytime you have a whole number and you're trying to do fraction, multiplication, or division, our rule is multiply straight across the top, straight across the bottom. We can make it into a fraction by just putting it over 1. So that's going to be my next step here. And then nothing's in common. 7 and 3 don't have anything in common. So I'm just going to multiply. 1 times 7 across the top is 7. 1 times 3 across the bottom is 3. Okay. And then our next step is to do our multiplication here, okay? Now, again, the signs are important, but they're not any different than they were back in Module 1. What we're doing here is we're multiplying a positive number times a negative number. We know what happens when our signs are different and we're multiplying. We just are going to get a negative product. And so we're going to look for common factors. 7 and 2 don't have anything in common with 3 and 3 on the bottom, so we're just going to multiply straight across the top. 7 times 2 is 14. 3 times 3 is 9. Negative 14 over 9 is going to be our answer here. Okay, so if we have a division with a little more going on, we might have to think about the order of operations. We do need to make sure we're doing this in the correct order, but that's kind of how we would work on that kind of a problem. Okay, we will also have some problems like this occasionally. We might ask you to evaluate x times y and x divided by y if x is 2/3 and y is 6/13. Okay, so if I want to evaluate these things, and I have values for x and y. Remember, when two things are right next to each other like this, it means they're multiplied. So xy is, for us, is going to be, we'll start there. Well, we're going to plug that 2/3 in for x, and we're going to plug that 6/13 in for y. Okay, and then we're going to do our multiplication. So look for common factors. I've got the 3 on the bottom, the 6 on the top, both divisible by 3. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. 6 divided by 3 is 2. Okay, and then that's it. Since 2 is my only factor on the top, and 2 doesn't go in anything on the denominator. So I'm ready to do my multiplication. I'm going to go straight across the top. 2 times 2 is 4. Straight across the bottom, 1 times 13 is 13. And so 4/13 is going to be my product there. If I want to do the other one, x divided by y. Okay, I'm going to plug in my values. So 2/3 divided by 6/13. And then I'm going to use my rule to rewrite this as an equivalent multiplication problem. I'm going to bring the 2/3 on over, change that division to multiplication, flip that second fraction upside down. Okay, and then I'm going to look for common factors. In this case, 2 goes into 6. 2 times 3 is 6. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. 6 divided by 2 is 3. And I'm ready to multiply straight across the top, straight across the bottom. So 13 over 9 is going to be my quotient when I do that division problem. So just want to kind of go through it one step at a time, substitute our values in. We do, again, I think it's really important that you take a second to do all your reducing before you do your multiplications, because it's just easier this way. The numbers are smaller, the numbers are easier to work with. You're going to save yourself some effort, and it's going to work out much better if you take that approach. Okay, so we do have a few little applications of this. Okay, we might ask you to find 1/5 of 75. Okay, and this is a problem where if you know what your vocabulary means, then it's going to make it a lot easier. This word "of" is something that we see quite a bit in math, and it's pretty much a dead giveaway that you're going to be multiplying. That word "of" means you're going to be multiplying the things that are around the of. So 1/5 of 75, we're going to do that by taking 1/5 times 75. And again, like we've seen before, if we have a whole number like 75, we can make it into a fraction to use our rules by making it 75 over 1. Okay, so I'm ready to do my multiplications. I want to look for common factors on the top and bottom. Okay, so 5 goes into 75 evenly, so 5 divided by 5 is 1. 75 divided by 5 is 15. Okay, and then that's it. Since everything on the bottom is a bunch of 1s, we're going to go ahead and multiply straight across the top. 1 times 15 is 15. 1 times 1, I don't even really have to write that. Anytime I have a value like this, a fraction that has a 1 on the bottom, I can just drop that denominator off. And so we're just going to get a whole number of 15 for our answer here. Okay. Okay, so we'll do one more word problem here. This one says a cruise costs 3/4 of a regular price. If the regular price is $21.80, find the sale price. So this is similar to the last one, even though there's more words in here. We're trying to find 3/4 of the regular price. Again, that word "of" is a dead giveaway for what to do here. It means we're gonna multiply. So we're gonna take 3/4 times our regular price, and it tells me in the next sentence that the regular price is $21.80. Okay, so that's kind of my setup. I'm going to go ahead and take that $21.80. I'm going to make it into a fraction, right? And then I'm going to try to reduce it down. And so the first thing that I would try to do here is I would try to take this $21.80 and just in your calculator or whatever, divide it by 4 and see if it works. And it's going to. So 4 goes into the 4 on the bottom, 4 goes into the $21.80 on the top. We're just going to take that out. We're going to reduce it down. Again, even though the numbers are kind of bigger here, they're going to be a lot smaller than they're going to be after we multiply. So it's better to do this ahead of time. And 2180 divided by 4, just throw that in your calculator, you'll get 545. Okay? And since everything on the bottom is a bunch of 1s, we're done with our reducing. So we're just going to multiply straight across the top, straight across the bottom. So 3 times 545 is 1635 on the bottom. 1 times 1 is 1. As you do this, you'll get used to where you just drop that off. You don't even have to write it if you don't want to. And so 1635 is going to be our sale price for this cruise. Okay, so hopefully that's enough to get you off to a good start in that lesson. Please let me know if you have any questions as you're going through it, and y'all have a good day.